Imagine seeing a Starship booster catch for the first time in your life, and then while everyone is cheering and screaming, you react like this.
Yes! Oh, yes! Awesome! Oh my god! It actually looks really good on the chopsticks. Wow! And unlike
I feel like I felt
wow!
that in my leg. Oh, I felt that in my legs.
Oh, did you?
No, really.
Really?
Yeah.
You okay?
I don't know how that would happen.
Maybe it's your titanium rod picking up
Would that be a thing?
I don't know.
During Flight 7 of Starship, I not only saw a booster catch for the first time, and keep in mind this was only the second time SpaceX had done this, and an extra large sonic boom from Starship, but I also actually noticed my rod in my leg for the first time in 2 years, and I didn't like it, as you can see from the video. If you didn't know already, I have a permanent titanium rod in my leg from when I broke my femur in March of 2023. And I'd really never felt it until now. While the sensation didn't last beyond even 5 minutes, it rattled me and I couldn't stop wondering, was I crazy? Or did the sonic boom from Starship actually give me a good idea of what it would be like to be a tuning fork? This question lingered on, and so I reached out to some orthopedic surgeons who already had a presence on social media. I figured at least one of them would be happy to share their hypothesis with us all on camera. The only surgeon who agreed and didn't ghost me was Dr. Chris Raynor, an orthopedic surgeon in Ottawa, Canada, who has a bigger YouTube channel than mine and an affinity for Starship launches, so great that they will always be streamed in his operating room.
And so everybody knows on the days when there's a rocket taking off, a Starship launch taking off, everybody knows I have my iPad and it's in the OR, and I might have to take a surgical break for a minute to watch it take off and to watch it land.
You see, I'd asked Grok and ChatGPT for some answers, but I figured it'd be best to get it straight from the surgeon who has over 20 years of experience.
Tell me your ortho without telling me your ortho.
It's 8 o'clock. Has anybody seen anesthesia yet?
In this episode, you will see me beg for free healthcare from our Canadian orthopedic surgeon expert. Just kidding, but seriously, I would probably have to spend a ridiculous amount even to see my own surgeon just for some lingering questions I have about my leg. So a big thank you to Dr. Raynor for his time and knowledge. Now, let's get to business. The main reason that I reached out to you is a very interesting one, and I can't find anyone who has reported on this or has even noticed this, at least not publicly.
Maybe it's your titanium rod picking up
Would that be a thing?
I don't know.
Would that be a thing? That is why I'm reaching out to you. I've never felt anything with my rod. I mean, I have some residual knee stuff, and we can talk about that. But the main thing is I've never had that. When it gets cold out, I've heard that you're supposed to feel your rod, blah, blah, blah. It was like, this was the first time I actually felt sort of this stinging, tingling sensation just immediately in my leg after the sonic boom. So I wanted to ask you, does that surprise you? Because it didn't happen the second time, but I also went inside a house during the sonic boom because I was afraid after the first one had that reaction.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, before I answer, let me ask you a few questions. So how far out from your injury are you? Number two, when you healed after your injury, did it heal sort of uneventfully, or was there any significant delay, or was there any other extenuating circumstances, such as infection or that kind of thing?
So I was just shy of the 2-year anniversary in that video. So I just surpassed 2 years about 2 weeks ago. So, it's been a significant amount of time. The only issue that I experienced was actually during PT, and I tore my hip labrum. Luckily, that sort of healed on its own, but that's really the only complication that I had throughout this entire span.
First of all, I would say I have not heard of that happening before, but that I'll say that with a caveat in that being outside with a large sonic boom as we're catching a 20-story booster, that's a new thing, right? So that's that you're now exposing this hardware to something that probably people never anticipated or thought about before. So I will say that, but if I think about this a little bit, I've often said to people, when we operate on a joint, now not necessarily a bone itself, but on the joint, I have seen with patients and myself, I've had several knee surgeries, that usually in the first year after we've performed surgery, there will be some sensitivity to big changes in barometric pressure. And so if there's going to be a big thunderstorm or there's going to be a big snowstorm or something like that, oftentimes people will feel some soreness, even though there's no lasting pathology or problem within the joint. Oftentimes they'll feel some soreness prior to that weather pattern moving through. And then, once the precipitation has kind of come and finished, then usually that discomfort goes away. And this is something that I've noticed myself. There are times when I'll wake up and I'll go, oh my God, like what is going on? I didn't do anything to my knee. And then, I look at the weather, oh shoot, there's going to be a thunderstorm, a rainstorm, or snowstorm later that day. And then, everything is fine the following day. Anecdotally, this is something that I've seen in myself and with my patients. And there's not really anything in the literature that corroborates this, but I've seen it. And, over the years, I've been in practice for 15 years and 6 years of training before that, or 7 years of training before that. This is something that I've heard people talk about, and I've seen it. So I even though it may not necessarily be cited in the literature, this is something that happens. And that's with respect to the joint. Now, it is also possible that this may extend to the actual bones themselves. Generally speaking, however, like if the bone heals and you have a nice solid union, there's no gap or anything like that, I wouldn't anticipate that you would get that happening into the bone itself. And I'd not heard people mention that. But I will say that there are a few things about a nail in particular that make it sort of more feasible. So number one, assuming that you had a titanium nail that was put in through the knee joint, whether you have it inserted in an infrapatellar or a suprapatellar manner, meaning below or above the kneecap, doesn't really matter. You're still making a hole in the top of the tibia to put that in. And as soon as you do that, you're taking a closed environment and turning it into an open environment, allowing it to have some access to the ambient pressure around it. Again, from anecdotes, I will tell you, when we do, in trauma situations where we have patients who have poor venous access, and we have to do what's called an intraosseous IV. That's basically where we're drilling a small little hole into the bone and we're infusing fluids through the bone, and that's how we're giving it to the patient rather than giving it to them by vein. Intraosseous fluid administration is known to be super painful, and that's because the inside of the bone is very, very sensitive to pressure. The bone itself is wrapped in it's kind of like saran wrap. It's called the periosteum. And the periosteum is very sensitive, doesn't like to be stretched. And the bone, although it looks hard and it looks rigid, is actually kind of malleable. Bone bends. The cortex will expand. The outer shell of the bone will expand a little bit. So when you push fluid under pressure, it kind of expands a little bit, and that's painful. So going back to what I was saying before, now that you have this closed environment, normally it's a container, it has no opening to the external environment. Then you all of a sudden put a hole in it. Now, if there are changes in the surrounding pressure around that bone, then that can be transmitted to the inside of the bone. When I think about that possibility and I look at your hardware, I think, okay, yes, well, so this was a femoral nail, so it goes in the thigh, and that's a retrograde femoral nail, which means that we put it in from the knee going back up to the hip joint, as opposed to other types of nails where we go from the hip down to the knee. So because of that, you have a hole inside of your knee joint. And again, you've now made the inside of that bone communicate with the joint space. In addition to that, when you look at your x-rays, they did a really great job of the reduction, but you can see that the reduction is not perfect. And it's hard for us to, always get it so that it keys in exactly like a lock. And so you can see that there's a little bit of displacement or separation at the level of the fracture. And over time, this will fill in with bone, but it's possible that it takes some time for that to occur. And there may still be small little areas that have not completely filled in. So again, you have another area that might be exposed to the ambient pressure. Conceivably, when you have this sonic boom from the booster coming down, that obviously, like when you see some of the pictures of that coming down through the air, you can literally see the air molecules moving out of the way. And you can see that for a certain distance, but obviously that's pressure, and that pressure wave is propagating through the air. So when you hear it, you are being hit by that wave. And so for a split second of time, the ambient pressure around you that air is being compressed. And because you happen to have a bone with a hole in it, that pressure change is transmitted through to your body, then into the knee joint, and presumably in through the cortex of the bone into the medullary or the spongy cavity inside, and then you get a sudden expansion of that bone, pressure and pain. It's very transient because it kind of, the wave passes you and then it's gone. But if I were to sort of guess as to the mechanism of it, that's what I would think. And I would be interested to see, so a cool experiment would be to have people who have had femoral nail antegrade, which is one that comes from the hip joint, but it actually doesn't, the nail is not inserted in the joint. It's inserted just outside of the joint. So the joint capsule is still preserved. So I'd be interested to see if you had, selected a group of people who all had femoral fixation, and you compared the people who had an antegrade nail versus people like yourself who had a retrograde nail, and then expose them to a sonic boom and see what happens and see who has pain. Because I'm venturing to guess that all the people who had the retrograde nail like yourself would have had a similar reaction like you did, and all the people who had the antegrade nail wouldn't notice anything. Titanium, we have used intramedullary nails of different composition over the years. And in the past, we used to use stainless steel, but we stopped using stainless steel because its modulus of elasticity was different than that of bone. And so the stainless steel was much more rigid than bone. And once you put it in, it's really great because it's unlikely to break, but you tend to shield the bone from the forces that it needs to remain healthy. And you could actually do two things. So number one, you could create osteopenia in the segment that was transfixed because none of it is seeing load because the load is all going through the nail. And then the other thing is you might make it so that the bone at the end of the nail was soft, and it might more easily break at the either end. We stopped doing that, and one of the reasons why they switched to titanium is because titanium has a similar modulus of elasticity as does bone. So it bends the same as bone, although the titanium nail it's probably harder to break it than it is the bone because it's solid. It will sort of bend similarly to bone. With that, it's possible, although this is probably reaching, that there is a particular resonance. Everything has a tone at which it will vibrate. And it's possible that sonic boom just happened to be the right resonance for the titanium nail. And so when you get hit with that, boom, that pressure wave comes and it actually vibrates the nail. That might give you a burning sensation because that nail is moving very, very quickly. And even though it's transient only for a split second, it might happen with enough energy that it gets the nail vibrating. That vibration would cause probably a heating sensation, maybe a stinging sensation. And yeah, so maybe that's also part of it.
Yeah, that was our sort of main theory, was like it sort of made my rod or nail, as you call it, into like a tuning fork.
Exactly. And it just will vibrate until kind of that energy that's imparted into the nail is lost.
And there was actually a gentleman at the last launch who also had a rod in his femur, and he said that he felt it on flight 7, as did I, as you saw in the video, but we both didn't feel it in flight 8. So it's like, I'm still unsure if it was all in my head or, I don't think it was, but it's been this sort of mystery in the background that I've been wanting some answers aside from like Grok and Chat GPT.
Well, I would, like I said, I don't think this is something that's been widely studied. So I don't think that you'll find a lot on it. But I would look at, like, I'm trying to remember what were the differences between flight 7 and flight 8. Flight 7, the angle of approach was much more direct, whereas with flight 8, it was much more sort of tangential, and then it kind of at the end just kind of like swung quickly and then straightened out. You have to think about those things as well. What was the relative approach speed? And I think if we're talking about pressure waves, in general, the air density is the same. But if one day was a little bit more cloudy, there's a little bit more precipitation in the air, then the density might have been a little bit greater. And so then you get better propagation of pressure waves, and you might have felt it more on that day than the other.
Even if this were to happen again, my leg is probably safe. Obviously, there's still some PTSD involved with what happened. And so, like, do you think that this is anything to really get anxious about?
Oh, no, not at all. No, I don't think there's any problem. If either of the mechanisms that I talked about are at all involved, it's potentially something that might happen again, but I don't think there's anything to worry about.
I just took that about a few weeks ago, and this shows, you can see sort of the bone growth and
exactly. And so you can see like how you've got significant amount of callus, or what we call new bone formation, around the area of the fracture. So that's fully healed. I don't think there's anything that you need to worry about. It may be that you now have a booster catch tuning fork that you have, but other than that, it's like, oh, cool party trick. Watch this. I can tell when the booster's coming back. But no, I don't think there's anything to worry about.
Well, and so I have a pretty decently sized X account, and I posted about this, like, hey, this really weird thing happened, and I've never felt my rod until today, and it's kind of freaking me out. And a lot of people were like, hey, I have metal in my body, like, please find out, what we need to know. And so basically, this probably could happen to really anyone with metal in their body.
Well, I think it could, but I think it's more likely to happen to somebody who has an intramedullary nail like yourself. Because generally speaking, if you have a plate, when we put the plate on the surface of the bone and we drill to put the screws. The screws usually get what we call bicortical purchase, meaning that they go through both sides of the bone. So you've drilled a hole through the bone, but you're plugging it on both sides. And you do that along the length of the plate, whatever size of plate you're putting on. So once the fracture heals at the fracture site, and over time, that bone grows and you get callus and it heals. Usually, if you ever have to go back in for these patients, you'll see that the screws themselves are partially overgrown by new bone, and the plate itself is partially overgrown by new bone. So much so that, generally speaking, when I put in implants, especially plates, I leave them in, and I tell patients I'm not taking them out. Some people do, but I don't. If they, really feel strongly and they want it out, then I will take it. But I always tell them the incision to get it out is going to be bigger than the incision we use to put it in, because invariably there's always going to be some extra bone growth over top of the plate, over the ends of the plate and over the screws, and then we got to have a bigger incision to get exposure to get that out. Although, yes, conceivably it could happen to anybody, I think it's probably more likely going to happen to people who've had intramedullary nail, and they've just had the central cavity of the bone opened up. I don't think it would be as likely with people who've had plate fixation.
I do think it's interesting, with obviously SpaceX wants to ramp the cadence of Starship big time. And so, having really loud sonic booms in southern Texas as well as Florida coming up here soon is going to be, they already have some in Florida, but these are like really loud. Is it any concern just for even normal people, like this sonic boom? Does it do anything negative to your body? Or no?
Well, so what's loud? I don't know what loud is, because you'll have to tell me. It sounded loud to me, but I'm watching a video stream, right? So I don't know how loud that is for comparison. But say if you think of say a jet engine or something that's like about 110 decibels or something like that, or gunshot, which is slightly more than 100 decibels, like those things are loud. And while there may not necessarily be negative health effects from sounds of that level, if it's significantly more, and it is associated with a very large pressure wave, which can then sort of transmit, the force to your body, then that can kind of be somewhat analogous to people who are in the military who are doing a lot of artillery stuff. Snipers, because they are seeing a lot of concussive force from the proximity of the action to their head while they're shooting, even though they're not being smashed in the head, it's like they're getting little micro traumas all the time to their brain. And over a lifetime of shooting, that can have negative effects. And I think if it's loud enough and associated with a big enough pressure wave, it could kind of be looked at the same. You'd probably have to be exposed to thousands of reentries to have a negative effect. But I think if the sound is loud enough and the pressure wave is strong enough, then certainly you are giving your brain a little bit of a jolt every time. And the interesting thing about the brain is, I tell people it's like electrified jello, right? And it's suspended in this fluid in your skull. So whenever you get hit in the side of your head, you get two injuries for the price of one, because you get the coup injury, which is the initial impact on the side of injury. But then because your brain is suspended in fluid, it moves over to the other side of your skull and then bounces off the inside of your skull. So you could be getting small magnitude injuries like that. And then in addition, there is just the fact of that pressure wave moving through your brain again, and I'm just spitballing as I'm thinking about this here. You could also get some actual shear between the actual neurons themselves. There's a condition called diffuse axonal injury where when you smash your head hard enough, you don't necessarily have outright damage where the brain hit the skull. Like it's not that it's pushed in or anything like that, or you have a hole or a laceration there, but the fact that the brain was moved so quickly and so violently, sometimes you can pull apart the connection between the actual neurons in the brain, and so that's a stretch. But maybe over time you could get that a low grade of that type of thing just from these repeated sonic booms. But again, I would think that you would probably have to be exposed to quite a lot of them, or you would have to be pretty close, right?
I was going to say there's an exclusion zone for a reason. First and foremost, if the rocket blows up, you don't want to be there. But so I've never been closer than 5.5 miles. And the one that you watched was 6 miles away from the pad. So probably good to heed to that, advice.
Every time I watch one of the takeoffs, and then and I watch the booster returning, more so when it's taking off though, and I just look at the amount of power that is coming out of this rocket, and I think to myself, I'm actually constantly amazed when I look at how close to the OLM, how close all the equipment, the ground equipment is to it, and I just think, like, I can't believe that it's not blown off its mounts. It's not damaged more than it is. And granted, the first couple of ones there was a lot of damage, but to be honest, I expected there to be more because it's such a huge rocket, and it seems that everything is so close. And it would be very cool to have some gauges, pressure gauges, and stuff that are. And I'm sure they have this, but I don't know that they share that information. But it would just be interesting to see what some of the numbers are with respect to the amount of decibels, like in the tank farm. Like it'd be interesting to know just like what is the pressure that is being experienced there, how many decibels, like holy crap. Of course, they have all their safety procedures, and they clear the whole site before everything's take off, before any rockets take off. But I always think to myself, just the same way, even though they have the NOTAMs, and then they have the marine equivalents of these, they sometimes stop the count. Why did they stop the count? Then you find out later it's because some jackass put his boat into the no-fly, like into the no boating zone. Yep. And I think who's to stop? Like we have rules for reasons, but there's always somebody who wants to break the rules. And so I think to myself, what would happen to a human being if they thought, this is all hooey, like I can do what I want, and they kind of snuck onto the property when everybody thought it was clear. Like I just am curious about the amount of force that their bodies would see and what would happen to them. Not that I want anybody to do it, but I'm just curious.
Well, you can be sure I will not volunteer for that experiment. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of people camp down there. So, there's been rumors that people go into the exclusion zone, but I don't know if anyone's like right there. You need to see it for yourself. You need to feel it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. No, I would want to go down there at some point just to do that, just to feel it and to watch it. It's funny because so I've tried to watch every single event that they've had, and some of them have occurred when I'm working. And so everybody knows on the days when there's a rocket taking off, a Starship launch taking off, everybody knows I have my iPad and it's in the OR, and I might have to take a surgical break for a minute to watch it take off and to watch it land. So I just think it's the coolest thing. And every time I see one land. So now they've done 3 successful catches. I have to remind people who are not as nerdy about space as other people, as you or myself. I have to tell them, okay, think about this for a minute. This is a thing that is hurtling through space. Like when it's coming back down and it's heading back towards the chopsticks, this thing is moving at 5,000 miles per hour, and it is 22 stories tall, right? Like 22 stories. Like that's absolutely incredible, right? Like, and I just think that it is amazing. It's an amazing technology, and it's an amazing piece of equipment, and what they're doing is absolutely astounding. So
Both times I've seen it, I'm like, that's coming in way too fast. It's going to crash. And then it doesn't.
well, and the thing is, like, you don't really have when you're watching the stream, you don't really have an appreciation for how fast it's moving, just because you have a narrow perspective. They're focusing on it, so you're not seeing stuff around it for reference, and you just don't really understand. When you think about it, I think that thing is moving faster than a bullet. Yeah. And when you shoot a gun, right? Like I'm a military reservist, and I like to go to the range. When you shoot a rifle, for example, it's not as if you can watch the bullet, right? Like you shoot the bullet, you see a puff of smoke, and then if everything is okay, you hit the target. You see it hit the target, or you hear it hit the target if you're shooting metal. That's what you see, and it's moving. It's a 22-story building that's moving faster than that. And that is just absolutely insane.
So please give Dr. Raynor a follow on Instagram and YouTube. I asked him if he would be willing to do a collaboration on a Mars video discussing why he believes we need to have a surgeon on the first flight to Mars. So let me know, would you like me to expedite that story idea? Thanks so much for supporting my channel. I hope that this video was somewhat useful, or at least entertaining. I think it's cool to have orthopedic surgery and the space world collide, and I love chatting with experts in the medical field.